What's up, guys? Jordan from Bennett's Customs. We are back on another episode. We are going to be working on the Roadster. I have the steering parts, kind of everything came in the mail today, which was great. It all came at once, so I have enough work now to basically get this thing steering. And I want to grab that steering wheel. I want to do this. I want everything to work and operate. There's going to be a few cool little brackets and stuff I get to make for it, which will be really neat. As you saw in our last one, I just fabricated up this really cool little headlight bar. It's definitely a little bit different. I actually removed the horn and just tested out this cool old guide headlight that we got. Or not headlight, sorry, fog light, which looks pretty neat. And I just stuck this on just for shits. This is an old license plate topper that casting mob, he does them locally back home in Vancouver. I kind of aged it using that scaler that I mentioned that I used for doing here. And I kind of just ran over the whole thing. And you can kind of see it's really quite textured. This is kind of what we got today. So I am going to run a steering stabilizer. I think it's going to be kind of a cool idea. Never really run one before on the early car. This would actually be perfect for the race car too. We got some new steering balls. These are the ones that go on the end of your steering arms. And then we can run the early style kind of 30 or 28 to, I don't know. I don't remember what year these went up to. I think only maybe 31. But yeah, these look really nice. What I had done was I had a mate, Phil at the machine shop, and I had this supplied bar, and he was able to just machine a thread on both sides, a right and a left hand. So there's my drag link. And then I did give him an example. This was the old cross steer that went across, and these ones are a little bit different. This is a stock one, and they're kind of a hollow tube that is kind of drawn in, and then yeah, they are kind of got that nice taper and then threaded. So he was able to just get some 7/8 shaft, and then he just did a nice little taper right there, and we've got our threads on there, and it's nice and stout. So now we got our cross steer. So I think these will look really nice, and I got some rebuild kits coming for these, so I will end up going through and just making sure that they're all clean inside. But for now, I can just kind of utilize the old springs and cups just to hold everything together. But what I want to do is get this fitted in there. I'm going to make some really cool little brackets. I got a little bit inspired by my mate Alex. He's building basically the same thing I'm building as well. He's on Instagram, Steel Smith, incredible fabrication as well. Yeah, him and I always bounce ideas back, but I've got a little bit inspired with his little design he did on his. So I want to get this all in, then we're going to pull this steering column out, and I'm going to sleeve the inside so we can actually weld this shaft to the bottom one. This is kind of just floating in there. Once that's on, I got the key there and the nut. We can put our steering wheel on, and hopefully I'll go like this, and these will do that. I have been playing around with the pedal mock-up already, so you can see I got those 33, 34 pedals sitting in there at the moment. And yeah, gonna be kind of playing around with those, and then once that's off, basically body can come off and we can start doing the rest of the rust repair on it. Really, what I want to get done now is the steering. So let's get straight into it. Like to try and get the drag or cross steer on first. Once that's on, then I can kind of measure where we're going to put that steering stabilizer. And I think I'm going to do is I'll probably mount the steering stabilizer to the drag link, and then I'm probably going to make a nice little neat bracket that will come off the inside of the wishbone, and I'll just weld it straight to that. So it'll bolt in, and then we'll have a nice little cross steer on there. So, and then what we'll do is mount those steering balls, are just that. They got the nice ball on them. They're kind of a bit of a rough surface, which is kind of interesting. That's our taper for the steering arm. And then we have our castle nut that will go on there. And we got our hole for our split pin. Cool. So I will just show you what they look like. So you got the nut on the top, and then underneath we'll have the little ball. So what I'm gonna roughly do is I'm just gonna run a tape, try and get it relatively even here. And then once I got the rim or hub, backing hubs kind of relatively square, then I'll just do a center measurement across. And I know that's the width I need to make the cross steer, because there is a little bit of adjustment. Just go like that. This is just rough, just so I can kind of get an idea. So if I run a tape onto, so let's say 1233. I'm going to adjust this guy here. We'll get that. I just got the old bag with some springs and the bits in there, but they are totally fine to use for now. All right, one thing I'm gonna do, I'm actually just gonna put the steering ball in first, because I don't have a whole lot of room to adjust this off the back of the backing plate. And then these will, when I get the rebuild kits for these, I'll have a nice little bushing in the metal bit that'll go over top of it. I think that is good, so I'm just gonna go and hold this up, see if we can make this work. So running these early ones with the backing plates, there's not a lot of room for adjustment, so you kind of want to have these adjusted how you want, and then you can put it up into place. I kind of lucked out with all this too, you know, using that 36 wishbone that I'd modified at the back. It gave me a lot of room. Like, I could actually lift these up if I wanted and put them there, but it's kind of different. A lot of the people's, this would be a lot lower, and your steering arm, by the time you have your ball, this would be flipped the opposite way and would actually travel over top. You know, I'd probably run into some issues when if I wanted to run a drop axle, but I'm kind of not planning on to. So this should kind of do the trick. That's it, 1350 both sides. All right, well anyways, it does what it's supposed to do, which is awesome. Let me just see which way it's gonna be better. Yeah, I'm gonna have to pull that off to slide that on. So I'll just mark that, pull this, take this tie rod off. I'll slide our little bracket onto there. All right, while we wait for something to cool down, I'm just gonna actually adjust these right now. Might as well, because I feel like I can get them pretty close. They actually have to come a fair bit in order to compensate for the style and angle of the headlight bucket. So we're just gonna heat these up, get them to a nice glow. All I've done is I've just used a little spud spar. Gonna throw it in there, and then I'll just use a wrench like that. We're just gonna pull it back, and then I got my little degree finder here. We can just make sure that it's at our desired. It's mainly more for that side because I don't know what the degree is gonna be yet. Good there. Headlight bucket in. It looks weird because it's definitely a lot of angle, but if that is tight, we have, yeah, that's perfect. That's it. That's literally it. That's awesome. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna stick this plate on there. I want to, okay, so that's at 0 degrees and 23.1. Okay, so now we know on this side, we got 3.4. So around 20 degrees, we need to bend that one back. Ticket 22.9. Happy with that. What's it this way? 0.3. Perfect. Perfect. So now when I put the headlights on, at least I have a bit of adjustment. I can pull them right tight, which is good. I might even actually just try it now and set it up. Right, so we got those fixed, kind of locked into the position we wanted. There's our 23 degrees. And then, you know, that just allows us to have enough pivot with this. So right now they're basically sitting vertical. They look quite nice, which is good. Back down to the steering. I've kind of spoke to my mate Alex and Ray and just kind of was bouncing some ideas back and forth and, you know, really whether or not we needed to stick it on. But I'm gonna try it and see what it does. I think like I'll obviously drive without it on and then try it with it on and see. But what I'm gonna do is I heated up the end, as you can see right here, where it had the little dog leg to kind of run it at a 90 degrees off your wishbone. And then would that kind of be an angle towards your crossover shaft. So what I wanna do is I'm gonna run it parallel with the cross steer and I'm gonna just bolt it like that. And I'm gonna make a little mount that's gonna go off the side of the wishbone and it's gonna sit like that. So it's not crazy visible. You won't see it too much, which is a kind of a cool thing. Hopefully it'll kind of help with a little bit of vibration. And realistically, if everything's set up properly and your kingpins are done, and you've done new bushings in your spindles as well, your tie rod ends are all rebuilt and tight. Realistically, you shouldn't have much vibration, especially if you kind of have a balanced wheel. Somewhat tough if you're running like an old wire wheel and with bias ply tires, but I'm just gonna put it on there and see. So I'll run it without for the first couple shakedown tests, put some miles on it, see what it's like, and then I'll put it on and see if it makes a difference. And I'll let you guys know whether or not it makes a big difference or not. What we're gonna do is, I'm gonna pull this off now. We're gonna make a little mount for this, try and make something kind of cool looking for the inside, and then we're gonna tack that on. And I won't essentially finish welding it right now because it's kind of a hard position to get to. So I think what I'll do is I'll just tack it into place. And then when I go to kind of do the full removal of everything on the frame and chassis itself, then I can kind of get to it when the wishbone is separate to everything else. Put it on the table, weld it up, blend it, make it look pretty. So I think what I'll do is the same thing with the scaler. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna try and make something look a little bit old, maybe add some rivets, yeah, come up with kind of a simple but kind of neat looking idea. So let's get straight into it. Basically, I just found this. I really wish it was the right size, but this is kind of what I'm gonna create. So this will go to a plate. I'll have some, I don't know, something on it. Very similar to this. This will come up through the bottom like that, bolt on. It still can pivot and will allow movement for the cross steer itself. And I think it'll work just fine. So I'm gonna make something similar to that. I'm gonna weld it onto something, blend it. I'm gonna hit it with the scaler just for some shits and giggles and fix this onto it. All right, so it's going in the vise and I just found this sleeve. I'm just gonna drill this hole out and put this in, trim it to the size, weld it, job done. Okay, So what I'm gonna do, right, so I'm just gonna take it out of here. We're just gonna clean it up, deburr these edges. Then we're gonna slide that sleeve in there. That's a little bit longer. Weld it on both sides, and then we'll put this onto a plate. Okay, so this is kind of what we're up to. So we're gonna weld that in now. Okay, so all we're doing here is mocking it up. And what I was gonna do is I was gonna evenly weld this in on both sides, but because this sits just a little bit lower than the wishbone, bottom of the wishbone itself, I don't want the bracket to be kind of hanging off the back. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna offset it like this, so that when this slides up, it's already offset, you know, that say 1/4 of an inch, and then this bracket will have a little bit more like kind of meat off the side of the wishbone. So that's what I think I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna try and do that now. We're just gonna, all I'm doing is just bolting it down, or clamping it down. Put that down. Grab a pair of vice grips. Okay, so now I'm just gonna tack this into place. I'm not running it crazy hot because I kind of want the weld to stack sort of on it so that I have a little bit to blend. Well, I'm running 100 amps, so it's enough to penetrate and hold it into place. I'm kind of just hoping I can get it relatively clean so I can just go over it with the scaler. Nothing special, but it'll do the job. Okay, so now I'm just gonna fill this little gap up, and then we can kind of make the plate that this is gonna mount to. Technically could just weld this straight to the wishbone itself and keep it real simple, which is possibly what's gonna happen. Not that you can see a whole lot, but while I was under there before, I kind of explained to you what we were gonna do. So I'm just gonna kind of loosely bolt this in so I have a bit more of a location of exactly where it's gonna sit. And what I did too, as mentioned, I measured the full stroke of the stabilizer bar itself, and then you divide that by 2, make a mark, and then compress it all the way in until you've hit your mark. So on mine, it was 150 mil, and then I've compressed it down to, or made a center point at 75 mil, and then I've compressed it down to that. So now I know, well, I turn one way, it will extend out enough and it will compress enough either way. And there's still a lot of meat on either side from kind of doing it. So it's super hard to kind of get the camera in the right angle, especially with shadows and stuff like that. But here's our piece. So we have it flush on one side and we have the step on the other side. So this is going to face down, which is going to mount the bottom and kind of lift this bracket that 1/4 inch up, which is what I needed in order for it to not hang right off the edge of here. It now kind of sits flush. So essentially I could just weld this straight to the bar, which probably wouldn't be a bad idea, or I mount it to something and do it that way. Hold it up into place, see what it's gonna look like. So what I'm trying to do is run it like almost perfectly parallel. Like I can kind of bring it out on an angle, I just think it'll look silly. So, but also running it on an angle might be what I need to do in order for it to pivot nicely. So, okay, so that's where it's gonna sit. The dampener is kind of in position. And what I'm gonna do is just pivot the tire. And I'm just seeing if it's making any contact. Now I'm gonna go back the other way. Got full travel. So we have it back over on the table. Here's my bracket. I'm not happy with it, just welding it to it. I think it looks like an afterthought, which is what I'm trying to avoid. So find something under here. Maybe something like that. I'm gonna weld it, create 2 little bits, and then I can weld around the whole entire thing. Okay, so now I got these guys here. So what I'd do is I'll trim these and then I'll weld them on the backside. But I want these to kind of have a nice space around them. Okay, so here's my piece. This is gonna get welded on like that. And then I'm gonna drill a hole. I'm gonna put a rivet right there and another one on the other side. So I'm just gonna measure that now. On the wrap game. He's back in the kitchen. Saturday. On it. Making the best wraps going around in town. Boom. So this is kind of what we're trying to create here, is once we texture all this and weld it together, I think it'll look kind of neat. So this is how this is going to mount, like that. I'm going to run a pass around here on the inside, drop these guys in, like that, and that is our mount. So what I'll do is put this in the vise. We're gonna weld this all up. While that cools down, I'll trim the ends of these off and then we'll flip this over. And I think what I'm gonna do first is I'll hit it with the needle scaler, we'll texture it, then we'll plop these in and then we'll weld those in and then see what it looks like.
I see a dark cloud rising and I wonder what's gonna come of me.
Okay, so here we go. We got our nice piece here. It's welded, it's smooth, it looks great. What I want to do is texture this. I showed you in that previous video, we got our scaler and we are just gonna run this over and see what it looks like. So it looks pretty cool. Definitely kind of gave it that cast look, which is quite neat. It's very shiny. If it was more dull, you could see the detail in it a lot more, but it's definitely, yeah, made it look really neat. So what I think now what we'll do, I've just kind of beveled the edge of the hole on the inside. So what we're gonna do is bang these in and trim cut weld the back side so that they're flush. So they look kind of like a fake rivet, basically. Well, they are a fake rivet, and then this will kind of get welded around on the actual wishbone itself. So let's do that now.
The next time I hobo, gonna have my woman by my side. The next time I hobo, gonna have my woman.
Okay, so this is it. Made just a kind of a cool little bracket, and it's all textured, looks kind of cast looking almost. We have these rivets, makes it look like it's kind of been riveted on there. So what we're gonna do is go and kind of hold it into place where we think it is and see what it looks like. Right, so now we got it tacked in. You can see right here, I just put 2 tacks on either side, and then what I'll do is I'll leave that for now until we go to disassemble the whole car before we kind of go and paint a bunch of things, and I'll finish welding it then, just so it's a little bit easier. So what I'm gonna try and do now is I'm gonna put the jack under the front axle, and I'm just gonna try and cycle it, and just so you can kind of see it work and see it operate. And we're just going to make sure nothing's binding, nothing's touching, everything's kind of doing its job. Get our busted jack underneath it. If our measurements and everything are correct, this should not binding or touching anything yet. This is kind of the way I was more or less worried if it was going to. So that's twisting right now just because we don't have those. We don't have the bolts in our tie rod ends to lock it in, but if that's straight up and down, we are still very good. Feels nice and tight. So that's good. I like that too, because as I kind of mentioned, like it's not, you know, really the most traditional part on the car, and probably don't really need to run it, but I think it'll just kind of take that vibration out like I had mentioned. So I'm happy with that. And I think like what I will end up doing, Lee had messaged me from LG Speed and Custom. We were talking about this, and I will end up removing this nylock nut, and I'll put a castle nut with a cotter pin through it. And then so when you're kind of looking down, it'll just kind of look like the rest of the castle nuts here and look a little bit maybe more kind of the era. I'm happy with the way that bracket looked. The texturing was neat. It was kind of cool to try and create and make it look, you know, kind of like a cast piece. When I decide to paint everything, it's probably gonna all disappear, but at least it's kind of cool to play around with that scaler and create something. So now that that's on, we have the drag link over here. This is basically set up as it would be. So we have our pitman arm on there, and I'm just gonna kind of make sure everything's sort of in the right position. But the main thing that's stopping this thing from steering is the shaft itself, where it was split in 2 pieces to have it shipped over here. So I'm gonna pull this column out again. We're gonna pull the shaft out, and we're gonna weld that, make sure it's in the right position for the keyway for the steering wheel, so everything will be straight. And then once that's welded, installed, and the steering wheel is put back on, this thing is literally going to steer under my power. So you can see this is where it's been cut along here, and we just need to slug this. I will drill a couple holes so we can get a nice rosette weld. One pass there, plop it in, job done. Okay, so the edges are beveled. We've put our nice little hole there for our rosette weld. On this side as well, I've just pressed in our sleeve, and then this is just gonna go in and weld it up. Job done. So we're just gonna sit it back in there and make sure we kind of get it in the right location. Right, so steering wheel is on. I can't find my keyway for it, so I've just kind of just lightly put the nut on, but as you can see, I steer the wheel, hitman arm's moving. This is pretty cool, so this is kind of it right now. I'm gonna show you, you and I get to, we all get to experience it together. So I'm gonna stick this drag link on. All right, moment of truth. Oh yeah. Oh, that's insane. This is working. Oh yeah. Slight bind, that's okay. Something in the steering box is binding a bit. It also isn't fixed to the cowl or bottom of the tank either, so it's kind of a floating column, but I think it's just kind of binding on something inside the box. But other than that, once we rebuild these ends too, I mean the ball in the end of this pitman arm is still in really nice shape, which is awesome. So I think we shouldn't have any issues there. I'm digging the way it all looks. I love those early tie rod ends. That was awesome to be able to use those. The steering stabilizer's on there. It's working. Everything's kind of operating as it should. You can see it under there. And our nice little mount that we made. It's pretty cool to just see it kind of, you know, work and do what it's supposed to. I'm so happy that Steve was able to hook me up with that 32 box as well from Canada, right-hand drive. Like, so bizarre that he had that. I think what we're gonna do is end the video there. I'm really happy with that. That was awesome to be able to use those early tie rod ends, get that cross steer shaft kind of machined up from my mate Phil. We got the drag link in. We've fixed the steering column. We were able to make a cool mount and fit the steering stabilizer as well. Yeah, I'm stoked on it. And I believe, like, once we kind of pull everything apart and I rebuild that steering box, you know, and put all the right bits in there, everything kind of will seem to, you know, line up and work really well. I had kind of mentioned this earlier in the video, but I'm really happy with the way these 36 wishbones kind of worked with adapting that Model A rear ball. And you know what that's done for our benefit is just allowed these roundback spindles, 37 to 41, it just allowed them lots of clearance underneath. So rather than running it up above the wishbone itself and kind of traveling through here, you know, we've just kind of got it underneath, which I'm not phased about. I mean, it would look really nice if these were on top, but for now, you know, I'm stoked with the way this has all kind of been created and just seemed to sort of work. So And it doesn't look that bad, especially when you're kind of looking at the front. You don't really see it, which is neat. It's kind of hidden behind the axle, so it looks nice and simple. As well as our steering stabilizer, you know, it's pretty flash and shiny. But once everything's painted and then we got our grille, that'll come on there. That's gonna cover that right up, which is nice, so you won't really see it too much. We got those angles finished on the headlights. So now they're kind of sitting pretty where they're supposed to. It's really coming together. So like I've mentioned several times, we need to mount this to the bottom of the tank. I need to figure out our pedal assembly. And once we have our pedals sort of in place and where we want them, then we can kind of start playing with the body, getting the rust repair done, finishing off the subfloor where we've done the kick-ups for the 32 frame. Decide what we're gonna do back here with this. The frame rails kind of and spreader bar hanging out the back, whether or not we shorten it or just eliminate it completely. And then yeah, we can kind of get this thing, you know, relatively close to being able to blow apart. I think what I'll do is I'll finish off all the rust repair on the body itself. We'll trial fit that again back on there. In the meantime, hopefully I can get this motor out, decide what we're gonna do with the cam and everything. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. A little bit more simple of a video again. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, hit notifications, and we will see you on another episode of Bennett's Customs next week. Thanks guys.